The bar's neon glow burned into Jamie's retinas as he stumbled through the crowd, the world tilting like a ship in a storm. His heart raced, not just from the whiskey shots, but from the stranger's gaze, those damn blue eyes that had locked onto him from across the room. By the time Jamie's hand grazed the man's chest, a reckless impulse born of liquid courage, he was too far gone to care about consequences. It was a Friday night in downtown Seattle, the kind of night where the air hummed with possibility and regret. Jamie Carter, 25, a graphic designer with a knack for bad decisions, had come to the Rusty Anchor to drown his latest heartbreak. His boyfriend of 2 years, Ryan, had left him 3 weeks ago, citing different paths in a text that still stung like a fresh wound. The bar, with its sticky floors and pulsing music, was Jamie's escape, a place to blur the edges of his loneliness. He'd already downed 3 shots when he noticed the stranger leaning against the bar, exuding a quiet confidence that made Jamie's pulse stutter. The man was older, maybe early 30s, with a jawline that could cut glass and a tailored blazer that screamed money. His dark hair was swept back, and those blue eyes seemed to see right through Jamie's bravado. Jamie, in his faded jeans and slightly crumpled button-up, felt like a kid playing at being an adult. But the whiskey made him bold. He pushed through the crowd, heart pounding, and when he reached the stranger, words failed him. Instead, his hand moved on its own, brushing against the man's chest as he mumbled something incoherent about needing another drink. The stranger didn't flinch. Instead, he smirked, a slow, dangerous curve of his lips. "You always this forward? Or is it the whiskey talking?" His voice was low, smooth, like the burn of good bourbon. Jamie's face flushed, but he leaned closer, emboldened by the stranger's lack of retreat. "I'm Jamie," he slurred, his hand lingering a moment too long. "And you're way too hot to be standing alone." The man chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down Jamie's spine. "Elliot," he said, offering a hand. Jamie took it, their fingers brushing in a way that felt like a spark igniting kindling. For the next hour, they talked, or rather, Jamie rambled, and Elliot listened, his eyes never leaving Jamie's face. They spoke of music, of Seattle's rain-soaked streets, of dreams that felt too big for the world to hold. Jamie didn't notice the way Elliot's gaze softened, or the way his own laughter grew freer with every passing minute. By midnight, the bar was a blur of noise and bodies, and Jamie was drunker than he'd planned. Elliot, still composed, offered to walk him to a cab. Outside, the cool night air hit Jamie like a slap, sobering him just enough to realize how close he was standing to this man he barely knew. Their shoulders brushed as they walked, and when Jamie tripped on a cracked sidewalk, Elliot's hand steadied him, strong and sure. For a moment, they stood frozen, faces inches apart, the world narrowing to the space between them. "I shouldn't have touched you back there," Jamie muttered, his breath hitching. "I'm a mess tonight." Elliot's smile was gentle, but his eyes burned with something unspoken. "You're not a mess. You're honest." He paused, then added, "I like honest." Jamie's heart did a somersault. He wanted to kiss this man, to close the distance and see if those lips were as soft as they looked. But before he could act, Elliot stepped back, hailing a cab with a practiced ease. "Get home safe, Jamie," he said, his voice carrying a promise Jamie couldn't quite decipher. As the cab pulled away, Jamie pressed his forehead against the window, watching Elliot's silhouette fade into the night, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life or the best. The next morning, Jamie woke with a pounding headache and a vague memory of blue eyes. He dragged himself to work at Vantage Creative, a mid-sized advertising firm where he'd been scraping by as a junior designer. The office was abuzz with gossip about the new CEO, a game changer brought in to save the company from its recent slump. "Jamie," still nursing his hangover, barely paid attention until the staff meeting at 10 a.m. When the conference room doors opened, Jamie's stomach dropped. There, in a crisp suit, stood Elliot, the stranger from the bar. The man he'd drunkenly groped was now his boss, the new CEO of Vantage Creative. Elliot's eyes met Jamie's across the room, and that same smirk from last night flickered on his face. Gone in an instant. Jamie's world tilted again. But this time, it wasn't the whiskey. The meeting was a blur. Elliot Grayson, as he was introduced, spoke with the same commanding ease he'd shown at the bar, outlining bold plans for the company's future. Jamie sat frozen, his mind replaying every sloppy word, every reckless touch from the night before. When Elliot called on him to present a design concept, Jamie stammered through it, his face burning under that piercing gaze. Afterward, colleagues whispered about Elliot's reputation, a prodigy who'd turned failing companies around, a man who didn't tolerate mistakes. As the day wore on, Jamie couldn't shake the feeling that he'd blown it. He'd made a fool of himself in front of the one person who now held his career in his hands. Worse, he couldn't stop thinking about the way Elliot's hand had felt on his arm, steadying him in the night. By the time the office cleared out, Jamie was a wreck, torn between shame and a nagging spark of hope. Then, as he packed up to leave, a note slipped under his cubicle divider. In neat handwriting, it read, "Meet me at the Rusty Anchor. 8 p.m. We need to talk. E." Jamie's heart stopped. He didn't know if this was a firing or a second chance. But one thing was certain, his life was about to change. Jamie's hands shook as he reread the note, the words blurring under the fluorescent hum of the office lights. The Rusty Anchor at 8 p.m. Was Elliot planning to fire him in the same bar where they'd met? Or was this something else entirely? His mind spun with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. He spent the rest of the afternoon barely functioning, his designs a mess of misplaced lines and uninspired colors. His coworker, Mia, a sharp-tongued copywriter with a knack for reading people, noticed his distraction. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said, leaning over his cubicle. "What's up?" Jamie hesitated, then shoved the note into his pocket. "Just a rough night," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Mia raised an eyebrow but didn't press. She'd seen him through enough breakups to know when he was hiding something. By 7:30, Jamie was back at the Rusty Anchor, the bar's familiar chaos doing little to calm his nerves. He'd changed into a fresh shirt, hoping it made him look less like the disaster he felt. The memory of Elliot's smirk haunted him, equal parts thrilling and mortifying. He ordered a Sodano whiskey tonight and found a corner booth, his leg bouncing under the table as he waited. At exactly 8 p.m., Elliot walked in. He was still in his suit, but the tie was gone, and the top button of his shirt was undone, revealing a sliver of collarbone that Jamie tried not to stare at. Elliot's eyes scanned the room, landing on Jamie with an intensity that made his breath catch. He crossed the bar in long, purposeful strides and slid into the booth across from Jamie. "You came," Elliot said, his voice low but warm. "I wasn't sure you would." Jamie swallowed, his mouth dry despite the soda. "I figured if you're firing me, I'd rather hear it now than Monday." Elliot's laugh was soft, almost disarming. "Firing you? Is that what you think this is?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his gaze pinning Jamie in place. "I wanted to talk about last night." Jamie's face burned. "I'm sorry about, the groping thing. I was drunk, and Stop." Elliot's hand reached across the table, not touching but close enough to make Jamie's pulse race. "You don't need to apologize. I didn't mind." His lips twitched, that smirk returning. "In fact, I liked it." The words hit Jamie like a freight train. He stared, mouth slightly open, as Elliot continued. But I need to be clear. I'm your boss now. That complicates things. Jamie nodded, his heart sinking. Of course it did. A guy like Elliot, polished, powerful, probably straight, wasn't going to risk his career for a nobody like Jamie. But then Elliot's expression softened, and he added, that doesn't mean I'm not interested. The air between them crackled. Jamie's mind raced, trying to process the confession. Interested in him. Before he could respond, Elliot stood, tossing a few bills on the table. Think about it, Jamie. But be careful. I don't play games. He left without another word, leaving Jamie reeling. Over the next week, the office became a battlefield of tension. Elliot was professional to a fault, but every glance, every brush of their hands during meetings, felt like a secret shared. Jamie threw himself into his work, determined to prove he wasn't just some drunken flirt. His designs caught Elliot's attention, earning rare praise that felt like a lifeline. But outside of work, Jamie was a mess, torn between his growing feelings and the fear of crossing a line he couldn't uncross. One night, unable to sleep, Jamie wandered to a local coffee shop to sketch. He didn't expect to see Elliot there, hunched over a laptop, looking less like a CEO and more like a man carrying the weight of the world. Jamie hesitated, then approached. Mind if I join you? Elliot looked up, surprised but pleased. Only if you're buying the next round. They fell into easy conversation, the kind that felt like slipping into a warm bath. Elliot shared stories of his childhood in Boston, his struggles to prove himself in a cutthroat industry. Jamie opened up about his own fears of never being enough, of losing himself to heartbreak again. As they left the shop, the rain started, a soft Seattle drizzle that soaked them both. Under a street lamp, Elliot stopped, his eyes searching Jamie's face. I shouldn't want this, he said, his voice rough. But I do. Jamie's breath hitched. He stepped closer, the rain blurring the world around them. Then don't fight it, he whispered. For a moment, they stood there, the air heavy with unspoken promises. Then Elliot turned away, leaving Jamie in the rain, his heart pounding with hope and dread. The rain clung to Jamie's skin as he watched Elliot disappear into the night, his words echoing like a challenge. Don't fight it. But fighting was all Jamie knew, fighting his doubts, his fears, the voice in his head that said he wasn't good enough for someone like Elliot Grayson. Back at Vantage Creative, the tension only grew. Elliot's presence was a constant pull, his every word and glance loaded with meaning. During a late-night brainstorming session, their hands brushed over a storyboard, and Jamie felt the heat of it linger long after Elliot had moved on. Mia, ever observant, cornered him later. Spill it, Carter. What's going on with you and the boss? Nothing, Jamie lied, but his blush gave him away. Mia's eyes narrowed, but she didn't push. Instead, she warned, be careful. Guys like him don't play for keeps. Her words stung, but Jamie couldn't shake the memory of Elliot's confession in the rain. He started noticing the small things, the way Elliot's fingers lingered on a pen, the way he'd pause by Jamie's desk, his voice softening when he said Jamie's name. It was maddening, this dance of almosts and not quites. One evening, Vantage hosted a client dinner at a swanky downtown restaurant. Jamie, as part of the creative team, was dragged along, his nerves fraying at the thought of being near Elliot in such a public setting. The dinner was a blur of forced smiles and small talk. But afterward, as the group dispersed, Elliot caught Jamie's arm. Walk with me, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. They ended up at a quiet park overlooking the Puget Sound, the city lights glittering like stars on the water. Elliot was quieter than usual, his hands shoved in his pockets. "I've been thinking about you," he admitted, his voice raw. "More than I should." Jamie's heart leapt, but fear held him back. "You're my boss, Elliot. What happens if this goes wrong?" Elliot turned to him, his eyes fierce. "What happens if it goes right?" Before Jamie could respond, Elliot closed the distance, his lips brushing Jamie's in a kiss that was equal parts tentative and desperate. It was over too quickly, but it left Jamie breathless. His world reordered in an instant. They didn't speak of it the next day, but the air between them had shifted. Jamie threw himself into a new campaign, his designs bolder, more inspired. Elliot noticed, praising his work in front of the team, but his eyes held a private warmth that made Jamie's chest ache. They stole moments when they could a coffee run, a late-night email exchange that turned personal, a brush of fingers in the elevator. But the secrecy weighed on Jamie. He wasn't out at work, not fully, and the fear of being exposed gnawed at him. What if someone saw them? What if the company's conservative clients found out? The stakes felt higher every day, and Jamie began to pull back, avoiding Elliot's gaze, keeping his distance. Elliot noticed. One night, after everyone else had left the office, he cornered Jamie in the break room. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice tight. "You're shutting me out." Jamie's throat tightened. "I'm scared. Okay. This could ruin everything me job. Your reputation. I'm not worth that risk." Elliot's expression softened, but his voice was firm. "You don't get to decide what you're worth to me." He stepped closer, his hand cupping Jamie's cheek. "I'm not going anywhere, but I need you to meet me halfway." Jamie wanted to believe him, but doubt was a familiar enemy. That night, he lay awake, replaying Elliot's words, wondering if he had the courage to take the leap. The next morning, he found a new note on his desk. "Dinner. My place. 7 p.m. No excuses. E." Jamie's heart raced. This was a line they couldn't uncross. Elliot's apartment was nothing like Jamie had expected. Perched high above Seattle, it was all sleek lines and floor-to-ceiling windows. But the personal to chase a stack of well-worn books. A guitar leaning against the wall made it feel lived in. Human. Jamie stood in the doorway, clutching a bottle of wine he'd grabbed on impulse, his nerves screaming. Elliot greeted him with a smile that was equal parts warm and dangerous. "You brought wine," he said, taking the bottle. "Trying to impress me." "Trying not to puke," Jamie muttered, earning a laugh. Dinner was simple pasta. Candlelight. Music playing softly in the background, but the air was thick with unspoken questions. They talked easily at first. About work. About art. About the city they both loved. But as the night wore on, the conversation turned heavier. "I came out when I was 19, Elliot said, his voice quiet. "My family didn't take it well. I built this life-me career because I had to prove I was more than their disappointment." He looked at Jamie, his eyes searching. "What about you?" Jamie hesitated. He'd never told anyone at work about his past, about the small town in Oregon where being gay meant being invisible. "I left home at 17, he said finally. "My parents, they didn't kick me out, but they didn't want me around either. I've been running ever since." Elliot reached for his hand, his touch steadying. "You're not running now." The words felt like a promise, and when Elliot leaned in to kiss him, Jamie didn't pull away. The kiss was slow, deliberate, a claiming of something they'd both been circling for weeks. But the next day at work, reality crashed in. A coworker, Greg, a senior account manager with a chip on his shoulder, caught Jamie's eye in the break room and smirked. "Heard you're cozying up to the boss," he said, his tone dripping with insinuation. "Careful, Carter. That's a fast way to tank your career." Jamie's stomach churned. He brushed it off, but the words lingered, feeding his fears. By the end of the week, whispers were spreading, and Jamie felt eyes on him everywhere. He avoided Elliot, skipping meetings, burying himself in work. But Elliot wasn't one to be ignored. Late one evening, he found Jamie in the office, hunched over his desk. "You're avoiding me again," Elliot said, his voice tight with frustration. "What happened?" Jamie's resolve cracked. "People are talking. Greg saw us at the coffee shop, and now everyone's looking at me like I'm some opportunist. I can't do this, Elliot. I can't be the guy who sleeps his way to the top." Elliot's jaw clenched. "You think I'd let that happen? I'm not ashamed of you, Jamie. I'm not hiding." He stepped closer, his voice softening. "But I need to know you're in this with me." Jamie wanted to say yes, but fear held him back. He left without answering, the weight of his silence heavy between them. Over the weekend, he spiraled, replaying every moment with Elliot, every risk they were taking. By Monday, he'd made up his mind. He had to end it before it destroyed them both. But when he walked into the office, he found chaos. A major client had pulled out, threatening Vantage's future. Elliot was in crisis mode, rallying the team, and Jamie saw him in a new light, not just as the man he was falling for, but as a leader fighting for his people. In that moment, Jamie realized he couldn't walk away. Not yet. The office was a war zone, with phones ringing off the hook and tempers flaring. The client's withdrawal had left Vantage teetering, and Elliot was at the center of it all, his calm exterior barely masking the strain. Jamie watched him from across the room, torn between his resolve to pull back and the urge to stand by his side. He threw himself into the crisis, working late to redesign pitches, pouring his heart into every pixel. His designs were bold, risky, and Elliot noticed. "This is good," he said one night, leaning over Jamie's shoulder, his voice low. "Really good." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the chaos faded. But Jamie pulled away, the whispers in the office still echoing in his head. The rumors had grown louder. Greg's snide comments had spread, and now even Mia was giving Jamie sidelong glances. "You sure you know what you're doing?" she asked one day, her tone gentle but pointed. Jamie didn't answer. He wasn't sure of anything anymore. Elliot, meanwhile, was relentless. He didn't push, but he didn't retreat either. A brush of fingers here, a lingering look there, small gestures that kept Jamie tethered to him. One night, as they worked late, Elliot broke the silence. "I know you're scared," he said, his voice steady. "But I'm not. I want Thysis, and I'm willing to fight for it." Jamie's throat tightened. "What if it costs you everything? Your job, your reputation?" Elliot's eyes were fierce. "Some things are worth the cost." He reached for Jamie's hand, and this time, Jamie didn't pull away. They kissed, desperate and unguarded, the office dark around them. For the first time, Jamie let himself believe this could work. But the next morning, reality hit hard. An anonymous email circulated, hinting at inappropriate conduct between the CEO and a junior employee. The board called an emergency meeting, and Elliot was summoned. Jamie's heart sank as he watched him go, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Had Greg done this? Someone else? The office buzzed with speculation, and Jamie felt like he was drowning. He confronted Elliot later, his voice shaking. "This is my fault. If I hadn't..." "It's not your fault," Elliot cut in, his tone sharp. "This is about power, not us. Someone wants to undermine me, and they're using you to do it." He softened, touching Jamie's arm. "We'll get through this. Together." Jamie wanted to believe him, but the fear was suffocating. That night, he went to the Rusty Anchor, hoping to clear his head. To his surprise, Mia was there, nursing a beer. You're in deep, aren't you? She said, her eyes kind but worried. Yeah, Jamie admitted, his voice breaking. I think I love him. Mia sighed. Then fight for him. But be ready for the fallout. Her words stayed with Jamie as he left the bar, the city lights blurring through his tears. He knew what he had to do, but the cost felt impossibly high. The board meeting loomed like a storm cloud. Jamie barely slept, haunted by the email and the whispers that followed him everywhere. He avoided Elliot, not out of anger, but out of fear that his presence would make things worse. But Elliot wasn't having it. He found Jamie in the office late one night, his face drawn with exhaustion. We need to talk, Elliot said, closing the door behind him. You can't keep running from this. Jamie's chest ached. I'm not running. I'm trying to protect you. Elliot's laugh was bitter. I don't need protecting. I need you. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I'm not ashamed of who I am, Jamie, or who I want to be with. Are you? The question hit like a punch. Jamie thought of his past, of hiding who he was to survive. He thought of Ryan, who'd left when things got hard. And he thought of Elliot, who hadn't wavered, even now. No, he said finally, his voice steady. I'm not ashamed. Elliot's relief was palpable. They didn't kiss, didn't touch, but the air between them felt alive with possibility. The next day, Elliot faced the board, his demeanor calm but unyielding. Jamie wasn't allowed in, but he waited outside, his heart in his throat. Hours later, Elliot emerged, his expression unreadable. They're investigating, he said, his voice low. But I'm not stepping down. And I'm not hiding us. He took Jamie's hand, a bold move in the open office. We're doing this my way. The investigation dragged on, and the office became a pressure cooker. Greg's smirks grew bolder, and Jamie overheard colleagues speculating about favoritism. But Elliot was a force, leading with a confidence that steadied the team. Jamie, inspired, poured his energy into a new campaign that wowed the remaining clients, earning grudging respect from even the skeptics. One night, Elliot invited Jamie to a gala, a high-profile event where Vantage was pitching to new investors. Jamie hesitated, knowing their appearance together would fuel the rumors. But Elliot's quiet, "I want you there," was enough. They arrived arm in arm, and for the first time, Jamie felt like he belonged not just at Elliot's side, but in his own skin. The gala was a success, but the victory was short-lived. The next day, a tabloid ran a story. CEO's secret romance threatens company's future. The photo was grainy, but it was unmistakably them, caught in a candid moment at the gala. Jamie's stomach dropped. This wasn't just office gossip, Anna Maria, it was public. The tabloid headline was a gut punch. Jamie stared at the grainy photo, his face half hidden but recognizable, and felt his world unravel. By noon, the story was everywhere online, in office whispers, even trending on X. Vantage's stock dipped, and the board called another meeting. Elliot was furious, not at Jamie, but at the violation of their privacy. This changes nothing, he told Jamie, his voice fierce. They don't get to dictate our lives. But Jamie wasn't so sure. He saw the strain in Elliot's eyes, the way he carried the weight of the company and their relationship alone. Jamie went to Mia, desperate for advice. What do I do? He asked, his voice breaking. I love him, but this could destroy him. Mia's eyes softened. Love doesn't mean letting go. It means fighting together. She paused, then added, but you need to decide what you're willing to risk. That night, Jamie found Elliot at his apartment, the city skyline a stark contrast to the chaos below. I'm sorry, Jamie said, his voice trembling. I never wanted this. Elliot pulled him close, his arms a refuge. "You're worth it," he said simply. They made love that night, not with the desperation of before, but with a quiet certainty, as if sealing a vow. For the first time, Jamie felt like they could face anything. The board's investigation concluded with a warning: Elliot could stay, but any hint of favoritism would cost him his position. He accepted the terms, his focus unwavering. Jamie, meanwhile, faced his own battles. He came out to the team, his voice shaking but steady, and was met with a mix of support and silence. Mia hugged him, whispering, "Proud of you." Work became their proving ground. Jamie's designs saved a major account, and Elliot's leadership steadied the company. They kept their relationship private, but not hidden, a careful balance that felt like a victory. But the tabloid story lingered, and Jamie knew the world wasn't done with them yet. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront, Elliot stopped, his hand in Jamie's. "I want a future with you," he said, his voice raw. "Not just stolen moments. A life." Jamie's heart swelled, but fear lingered. Could they really have that, with the world watching? Months passed, and Vantage stabilized, thanks to Elliot's vision and Jamie's talent. The rumors faded, replaced by respect for their work. But the world outside wasn't as forgiving. A conservative client threatened to pull out, citing values misalignment. Elliot faced them head-on, refusing to back down. "This is who I am," he said, his voice steady. "And I'm not apologizing for it." Jamie watched, awed by his courage. He realized then that love wasn't just passionate with standing together, even when it hurt. He took Elliot's hand in front of the client, a silent declaration. The client left, but others stayed, drawn to Vantage's authenticity. One night, at the rusty anchor where it all began, Jamie and Elliot sat in their old booth. The neon lights softer now, the air lighter. "You changed me," Jamie said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was running from myself until you." Elliot smiled, his eyes warm. "You made me believe in something bigger than ambition." He pulled out a small box, and Jamie's breath caught. Inside was a simple silver ring, a promise more than a proposal. "Not yet," Elliot said, "but someday." Jamie slipped the ring on, tears in his eyes. They weren't perfect, and the world wasn't kind, but they had each other. As they left the bar, hand in hand, the city stretched before them, vast and unforgiving, but theirs to conquer together. Their story wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real messy, painful, beautiful. Jamie had groped a stranger in a bar and found the love of his life. Elliot had taken a chance and found his home. And in the end, they learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to love despite it.